Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Well, today I want to talk about this fascinating story of FOSS software sabotage. Now, this article actually was originally going to be in my weekly news roundup from last week, and I looked at it and said, this is just so good I need to talk about it because it's not a simple, it's not a black and white issue. It raises a lot of bigger concerns. I know a lot of people mention this in passing in some of the broader news programs. Linux Experiment covered it, although I did not watch his particular video on it. Level 1 Tech covered it in their Level 1 News, I think this week. And so this is an article that has been making rounds. There's pretty much every tech journalist site has covered it. I'm just going to look at the brief Ars Technica one because I'm not going to cover the details of the article as much as some of the underlying philosophy inside. So, developer sabotages his own apps and then claims Aaron Swartz was murdered. What? So, there's a lot in here. And so, basically what happened as a summary is the developer of two commonly used JavaScript packages that are oftentimes used in many cases, corporate software, he got really irritated that all these big, global national corporations were using his FOSS software without so much as a tip of the hat beyond what the GPL required. And so what he got sick of is not being paid any of this and saying, hey, if I had a penny every time somebody used it, I'd be rich and all this. And so the two applications, faker.js and color.js, he went ahead and sabotaged those and causing the programs to completely break and then displaying a message that Aaron Swartz didn't commit suicide or something to that general effect. So what is going on here? First, let's go ahead and talk about the Aaron Swartz case because that is particularly interesting. This is a man who helped create a lot of the groundwork for free and open source software and the Common Creatives licenses and things like this. And what happened is he got irritated that public funds were used to fund scientific journal articles that were not freely available to the public. And so what he ended up doing is he created a program application and hid it somewhere in MIT where it was going on to the journal article locations that are available to university students, and he was grabbing every article he could and archiving them in a public location. Now, on the one side of his case, anything that is funded with public dollars is technically funded by the public. And anything technically funded by the public, in case of United States, is available freely to the public, unless you want like a paper copy, in which case you can have to pay a nominal paper fee because paper does cost money and things, but a digital copy should be available. That was what Aaron Swartz's argument was in saying, hey, these things are illegally being profiteered on even though the studies were funded by public dollars. Now, if any article that he pulled was not subject to public funds, then that in and of itself would be a cause of definite hacking charges. But in the case, if all he's doing is pulling out articles that are publicly funded, it's just walking a gray area. But his tool was considered a hacking, and so they basically started throwing the book at him, made his life living hell, and like anybody who is on the spectrum, as he probably was, because he was an excellent and brilliant programmer and activist in this area, he's overwhelmed by life and he ends up killing himself. And so that is what is kind of at the core of some of the philosophies inside of this. And so now let's move on and talk about the software being used. Now, I can say that there's a lot of online, particularly in web design, I use a lot of jQuery packages that are out there. And, I include the readmes and, in places, and I don't alter and edit the files. I'm also not building things for large corporate. But what happens is I'll download some jQuery library because it's a really cool styled photo gallery. I think it's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and use this. It completely satisfies all the licensing, whatever else. I'm not making a ton of money off of that. Somebody, might be deploying this on a website that gets, several hundred, maybe 1,000, hits in any given month or even year in some cases, depending on the size of your business. But what this guy is upset about is a couple of his JavaScript libraries are used on like Amazon Cloud Development Kits and other huge global national companies without any compensation. Now, he chose to walk down the path to release his software for free. And if you're doing that, you have to accept the consequences that somebody may take that software and run with it and continue to use it. And so he got mad about this because he was basically funding the big global corporate hacks that are destroying the world in his mind. And so he's like, well, I've had enough of this, and he sabotages the packages, so when the automatic updates pulled the latest version from GitHub, it completely crashed their platforms. Wow, yeah, that's a problematic thing, because this broke a lot of big companies, and all they were doing is following the licensing. If he wanted to develop these applications and make money off of them, he could have very easily forked them out. He could have kept the old existing libraries there with whatever vulnerabilities, forked it under a new thing under a different license, and he could have done it that way. Instead, he chose to just get mad and just break everything. So I think on that front, yeah, I definitely find that he's probably more in the wrong here. But at the same time, it begs other questions about free and open source software. If the FOSS software is based on tools like this, are we causing a risk in using those tools? Because in using those tools, are we bringing on the risk that somebody's going to tamper with something downstream that will push that bug and that error through a lot of different applications? Now, we had talked about some people are poisoning some of these libraries that are used in common packages by not poisoning the library itself, but creating a library that's so close to the original that some developers might accidentally use the fake and malicious ones, and everything utilizing that downstream library is going to be polluted with backdoors and malware. And so that raises some extra concerns that we might have regarding this. So this is definitely an interesting story in that what he did is he really did break a whole lot of things for a whole lot of companies, and he saw this as a line of activism. And this is the type of activism that causes a bad name in activism. This is not something that you should be doing. You should be approaching other things like, hey, simply stop providing security support, make a note of this and saying, hey, I can't develop this for free any longer when all these big companies are doing it, so any future bugs and errors are going to be on you to fix. That would have been a more appropriate thing to do, but instead he just chose to basically poison these and break a lot of things. Now, what ended up happening? Well, his account was suspended, or like he lost access, and then these were all on GitHub, so GitHub rolled back to the latest version, so anything pulling the latest versions from GitHub will automatically be restored to the last known working versions. And then he was pulled off of these. Now, this does mean that the companies are now going to have to bring on somebody to do these, but it raises these concerns. What is good and appropriate activism? What are the types of things that we should be doing? Should we be relying so much on free and open source software? The fact of the matter is, I think we should, but also us as a community also need to support the developers creating these. And so if you are using a FOSS application, if you are using a specific distro, I'd please encourage you to support the people that fund those, that create those, so that they have the funding that they do not feel underappreciated. They do not feel like they're being used by the whole world. Because if they're providing us good and secure applications and regularly updating them, it behooves us to support their cause in doing that. I mean, otherwise you're going to have to be the one doing the security audits. And, I personally am not going to be the one doing that. So I don't know about you, but That's our ideas here. So I thought this was good enough to have its own separate standalone video. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you agree with the developer that he should have sabotaged it? Do you say, yeah, maybe he should have done something different? Maybe he should have approached the companies and said, hey, I've been developing this for a long time. I've not received any compensation. Do you think you could think about at least making a donation to help support the project? Or maybe he did. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on this particular story in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we will see you next time. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.